Audio Cassette 2, Side A. Practice Listening Subtest, Paper 2. This is a practice listening test that resembles the IELTS listening test. It is a test to see how well you understand spoken English. You will hear several different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. The test is divided into 4 sections. There will be time for you to read the instructions and you will have a chance to check your work. You will hear each recording once only. At the end of the real IELTS listening subtest, you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1 to begin the test. Listening Section 1. In a moment, you will hear a conversation between 2 university students, William and Mary. It is their first day at the university, and they will both be attending the same lecture this morning. Before you listen, look at questions 1 to 6. First, William and Mary try to locate the lecture theatre. As you listen to the first part of the conversation, answer questions 1 to 6.
Well, Mary, how does it feel on your first day on campus?
I'm a little nervous, actually. Such a large campus, and I'm not quite sure how to get around it. How about you?
I feel the same way. That's why I think we should leave early, to get to our history lecture on time.
That sounds like a good idea to me. Look, it's 8:15 now. When is the lecture supposed to start again?
In 45 minutes. I know it's early, but better safe than sorry, I guess. We've got to go to the Bradley building, but I'm not sure where that is.
Since neither of us seem sure how to get there, why don't we ask that man sitting over there? He looks like he may know his way around here.
All right, I'll ask him. Excuse me, could you tell us how to get to the Bradley building?
The Bradley building? Certainly. Do you see those 2 buildings over there? The one on the right is the Student Union building. The other one is the Civics building. You have to take the path between the 2 buildings. When you get to the other side of the 2 buildings, you turn right. From there, the Bradley building is the second building on your left. Got it?
I think so. After we get past the Physics and Student Union building, we go right and continue to the second building on the left. Is that right?
That's right.
William and Mary later arrive in the lobby of the Bradley building.
Well, we've got here in good time. Do you know which theatre the lecture is in?
It's supposed to be in Lecture Theatre 8, I think, wherever that is. There are at least 10 floors in this building. Shall we ask somebody for directions again?
I don't think we'll need to. There is a directory next to the stairs over there. Let's take a look. Let's see. It says here that lecture theatres A to D are on the 6th floor. Theatres E and F are on the 8th floor, and the rest of the theatres are on the 10th floor.
Shall we take the stairs?
Are you serious? I'm not going to walk up all that way. Let's take that escalator over there.
Look, you can see it's not moving. If you don't want to walk up, I guess we'll have to find a lift.
Actually, I noticed a sign when we came into the building that said the lifts weren't working on the ground and first floors. I suppose we'd better take the stairs to the 2nd floor and take the lift from there.
Okay, let's go.
Mary and William arrive at Lecture Theatre H.
Well, we finally made it. And we started out exactly 40 minutes ago. I hope it doesn't take us so long next time.
Yes, if we can just memorise the way we got here.
Hey, William, that's strange. There's no one here. Are you sure this is the right place?
Yes, I'm sure. Hey, wait a moment. There's a sign posted on the blackboard. Can you see what it says?
Yeah, it says the professor is sick and that there'll be no lecture today. I guess that means we've come all the way to this lecture theatre for nothing.
Later, Mary and William discuss Mary's timetable for the rest of the week. Now look at questions 7 to 11. Note the examples that have been done for you. As the conversation continues, answer questions 7 to 11.
You've got a rather busy week ahead of you, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got 2 lectures on Tuesday. One is a chemistry lecture at 10 a.m. and the other is microbiology at 2 o'clock. The microbiology lecture goes for 1 hour and then it's followed immediately by a lab.
You've got a rather busy week ahead of you, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got 2 lectures on Tuesday. One is a chemistry lecture at 10 a.m. and the other is microbiology at 2 o'clock. The microbiology lecture goes for 1 hour and then it's followed immediately by a lab.
What lab is that?
Plant pathology.
That sounds like quite a full day.
Well, actually Wednesday is my busiest. I've got 2 tutorials, a lecture and a chemistry lab. The lab's first thing in the morning at 9 o'clock. That goes until 11 o'clock. Then my first tutorial, that's plant pathology, is at 12. I get a couple of hours break for lunch and relaxation. Then at 3 o'clock I've got another tutorial, my microbiology tutorial. That goes for 2 hours. Finally, at 5 o'clock, I've got my genetics lecture.
Phew, I see what you mean about Wednesday being your busiest day. What about the rest of the week?
Well, I've got nothing on Thursday, thankfully, and Friday's a short day. I've just got a lecture, plant pathology. And the best thing is that it begins at 10 o'clock in the morning, so from 11 o'clock I'm free to enjoy the weekend.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Listening section 2. In a moment, you are going to hear a talk given by Ms. Margaret Sales, a travel writer. She will be talking about travel to the Pacific Island country of Astoria. Before you listen, look at questions 12 to 15. An example has been provided for you. As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 12 to 15.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Margaret Sales. I'm a journalist who specialises in travel. Some of you may read the travel section of the newspaper, so you know the kinds of articles I write. Anyway, I'm not here to tell you about my job. I've been invited here by the Astoria Tourism Bureau to tell you about travel to Astoria. Now, as I'm sure most of you know, Astoria is a rather large island, located 1,100 kilometres from New Zealand. That's 1,100 kilometres in a northeast direction, I should say. As you can see on this map here, it's about 25% larger than New Zealand, and it has quite a different shape. While New Zealand's long and thin, Astoria has the shape of a rectangle. Some people would say almost square. Now, I guess none of you here has been to Astoria yet, so let me give you a bit of a description. Most of the people there live in the northern half of the island. This part of the island is warmer than the southern half, but it wouldn't be fair to say that the southern half is cold. In fact, the whole island is close enough to the equator so that no matter how far south you go, you wouldn't even need a jumper to stay warm.
Now look at questions 16 to 23. Note the examples that have been done for you. As the talk continues, answer questions 16 to 23.
There are 4 provinces in Astoria. Each has its own unique features and, in fact, one of them speaks a different language. The northwest quarter of the country is the province of Hornchurch. The capital of the country, which is called New Birmingham, is located in Hornchurch, and that's where the first English settlers came in the year 1756. New Birmingham is Astoria's largest city and the centre of its industry. And it's the culture of this part of the island that attracts so many tourists to Hornchurch. The culture's a strange mix of Old English and Polynesian. New Birmingham is where you'll most likely enter the country if you're going by air, because it has the busiest airport. Hornchurch's population is 2.5 million. The second largest province in terms of population is New Devon. It's got 500,000 people fewer than Hornchurch. New Devon takes up the northeast quarter of the country. Now, if you're the type of person who likes the beach, this is the best part of the island. The beaches are absolutely beautiful here, and they go on for miles. There are beach resorts all along the coast on this part of the island, and no matter how much money you want to spend on your holiday, there are beach resorts that will suit your budget in New Devon. South of New Devon is the province of Anglezark. This is the most mountainous part of Astoria, and it's least populated. Only 250,000 people live here. The mountains in Anglezark are well known for their hot springs, and many Astorians, as well as tourists, go there to rest and relax in the mineral baths. The hot springs are probably the best reason to visit the province, especially if you want to get away from the more crowded beaches of the northeastern part of the island. But take along a good pair of hiking boots if you want to take advantage of the wonderful bushwalking in the Anglezark Mountains. The 4th province of Astoria is in the southwest quarter of the island. It's called New Albion. Now that may sound deceptively English, but actually that's not the language you're likely to hear in New Albion. Although the English were the first Europeans to come to Astoria, explorers from Spain came only a few months later, and they settled in this part of the island. Today, Spanish is still the main language in New Albion, while people in the other 3 provinces communicate in English. Overseas visitors like to come to New Albion to indulge in one of Astoria's more famous agricultural products, wine. I'm sure you know that Astoria's wines are considered to be some of the best in the world. Well, all of the wine produced in Astoria is made in New Albion because the weather here is perfect for it. Warm days and cool nights, but not too humid. By the way, New Albion has the only other international airport in Astoria, so it's possible to arrive there first if you're going by air. Okay, I've briefly told you about the place. Now let me show you some slides, and then I'll tell you about prices and travel arrangements and...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Listening section 3. In a moment, you are going to hear an interview between Ms. Marilyn Stokes, a radio interviewer, and Mr. Roger Harridan, a scientist working in the field of sensory perception. Before you listen, look at questions 24 to 33. Note the example done for you. As you listen to the conversation, answer questions 24 to 33.
Our next guest is Mr. Roger Harridan. Roger is a scientist at the National Institute for Sense and Sensory Perception. He's come here to chat with us about our sense of smell. You know, how we use our nose. How are you today, Roger?
Very well, thank you, Marilyn.
You know, Roger, I love the smell of flowers and good food cooking, but I must admit, I've never really given much thought to my sense of smell.
Well, Marilyn, you're not alone in that. Most people would say their eyesight was their most important sense, but I suspect very few people would consider their nose or the idea of smell in that way.
Unless, of course, you make perfume for a living.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure most of your listeners would have heard of Immanuel Kant.
Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, you mean?
That's right. Now, Kant, who lived 200 years ago, was the first person we know of to rank the five senses in order of importance. Kant put seeing, or eyesight, in the first position. He regarded it as absolutely the most important sense. Now, what do you think he chose for number 2?
Oh, I really don't know. But if it were me, I'd choose hearing, I suppose.
Well, that's exactly what Kant chose as well. For the third most important sense, he chose touch. And touch was followed by taste.
Which leaves smell on the very bottom.
I'm afraid so. But this was simply the opinion of one man, of course. Actually, Kant was interested in the ideas of subjectivity and objectivity. He put smell last because he felt that it was subjective. He thought the senses of seeing and hearing and touch were objective, while taste and smell, he said, were subjective senses. He even went so far as to say that we humans don't need our sense of smell, that we can easily live without it. He obviously didn't have much use for these subjective senses.
Well, I can't say I agree with him on that last point. Roger, how well can people smell?
Well, most people have quite normal, quite acceptable abilities to smell. I mean, if there was a gas leak in this room, for example, the average person would notice fairly quickly. But some people are known as odor blind. Such people can't smell certain odors, certain smells. Just like people who are colourblind may not be able to see a particular colour. An odour-blind person may be able to enjoy the smell of one kind of flower, just as you or I would, but another kind of flower that you or I think smells wonderful, well, they wouldn't be able to smell a thing.
How extraordinary!
It is, isn't it? Another thing about our sense of smell. As we get older, many of us are less and less able to use our nose.
How old do you mean?
Well, about half of people over the age of 65 have some sort of trouble smelling things. And as you age even more, the sense weakens more. So for people over 80, we can expect some 3/4 to have problems with their ability to smell. And what's more, if you're a man, you can expect to have a weaker sense of smell than if you're a woman.
Roger, we were talking about perfume earlier. Now there's a huge industry based on people's sense of smell.
Yes, well, perfume is certainly big business. I read recently that in the United States alone, they sell $4.8 billion worth of perfume every year. And in Japan, the yearly sales are something like $5.5 billion, the world's biggest marketplace for the stuff.
I've always wondered what makes some people use certain perfumes.
I would say the number one reason is that they like the smell. But that's followed closely by reason number 2, Marilyn. They think it's fashionable. Perfumes that people see as fashionable sell well. Just ask any of the big fashion companies. But the interesting thing about perfume is that one brand of perfume doesn't smell the same on every person who uses it.
Yes, I've noticed that before. Why is that?
Scientists don't know why for certain. Researchers in France think it has something to do with the liver. That is, the condition of your liver determines how the perfume will smell on you. But other scientists aren't too sure of that theory.
Isn't it also true that each person smells the same perfume differently?
It's hard to say because, for example, you and I might smell a perfume and though we have the same sensation of the odour of the perfume, I may think it's a lovely smell and you may think it smells like last week's dinner.
I see what you mean. It's partly a matter of like and dislike then, isn't it, Roger?
That's right. In fact, there are people who dislike perfumes in general, any perfume. They feel it's an intrusion, you know, like cigarette smoke.
Wait, let me guess. You're going to tell me next that we're going to have anti-perfume campaigns, sort of like the campaigns against cigarette smoking indoors that have been so successful in so many places.
That's what I predict will happen, Marilyn. In fact, it's already begun in the United States, where I've heard...
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Listening section 4. You are attending a talk for overseas students on greeting customs in Australia. The speaker is Mr. Jeff Barker, an anthropologist. Before you listen, look at questions 34 to 42. An example has been done for you. As you listen to the talk, answer questions 34 to 42.
Think about how you greet someone for the first time in your own country, in your own culture. When you're introduced to a stranger, do you shake hands with him or her? Perhaps it isn't the custom to touch each other. Instead, you may simply bow to each other, or make no gesture at all. You know what to do in your own country, but what about when you go overseas for study or business? I've met many students who told me they were sometimes confused about these things in the first weeks after arriving here. And that's why I've been asked to give this talk to you today. Let's look at the act of shaking hands. And what I'm about to say applies mainly to men. When you're introduced to someone in a formal situation here in Australia, you always shake hands with them. And in an informal situation, it's quite common too. Shaking hands is the most accepted way of touching someone you don't know. And the idea of touching them is in itself important. If you don't shake someone's hand when they are clearly expecting it, the message you are sending is that you're not interested in them. So I advise you fellows to shake hands here, even if you don't normally do so in your own country. If you think that simply shaking hands is enough though, then you'd better listen to what I have to say next. How you shake hands is almost as important as the act itself. How you shake hands tells the other person a lot about you. It's true, and especially so of men. Here's what I mean. A limp or weak handshake by a man has the same meaning as no handshake at all. The message is, I'm not very interested in you. Think about this, because I know that some of you may come from cultures that accept limp handshakes as normal. Here, even if you don't intend to, you may send the wrong message. Is the best way, then, to use all your muscles and crush, and possibly hurt, the other person's hand? Man-to-man handshakes in Australia are sometimes like this. The message behind this kind of handshake is aggressiveness and a desire to compete. Unless you specifically want to communicate these feelings to the other person, you don't have to shake hands with all your strength. One more type of male handshake that can send the wrong message is the half handshake. Here, only the front half of the fingers is offered to the other person's hand. The message is that you have little confidence, that you're shy. I'm not a strong or courageous person. That's what a half handshake says. Let's look now at how it is for women. Until recently, women in Australia felt no great need to shake hands during introductions. That's changed as more and more women are working in business, government and academia. The way that women used to shake hands with men was to give only half the hand, that is, the fingers only. This gave little impression or message, at least to men. Nowadays, women are having to learn again how to shake hands. Now, women are beginning to offer all of the hand, the fingers and palm. The other person's hand is held and shaken firmly, but not too hard. This communicates to the other person more of a feeling of competence or strength than the old-fashioned way of doing it. How long should you shake hands? That's right, the length of time you shake hands also says something about you. If a man lets go of the other person's hand too quickly, what kind of message do you think that sends? Releasing your hand quite soon indicates that you don't want to get too involved, or you're not very interested in the other person. That goes for both women and men. However, it's both more acceptable and more common for two men to shake hands for a longer time, even as long as 6 or 7 seconds. The message in this case is, I like you, and generally indicates that the two men think they'll get on well. Finally, what do you do with your eyes when you're shaking a stranger's hand? In this society at least, you should look at the other person straight in the eyes. If you look somewhere else, like looking down or to the side, this sends a negative message to the other person. The other person may think you're being arrogant, that your action says, I am better than you. Another unpleasant message that comes across when there is no eye contact is, you don't exist, or I don't recognize your existence. So you see, there really is quite a lot to consider when shaking hands in this culture. As silly as it may sound, practicing handshaking, say with a friend, may be a good way to become confident, so that the next time you need to introduce yourself in a formal setting here in Australia, you'll feel comfortable knowing you did it the right way.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.